Today we will be discussing the rights and duties of stakeholders in research under the Indian Constitution. The objectives of this session are to outline the rights, duties and responsibilities of ethics committees, researchers, research institutions, participants and sponsors under the Indian law and the Indian Constitution. There is a vast amount of research happening in India. Some 23,000 PhDs are awarded every year around the country in different disciplines, including science, law, social sciences and abstract and theoretical subjects. In spite of this, there is a lot of hype surrounding clinical trials, and although it forms only about a very small proportion of the clinical trials happening around the globe. As in all research areas, there are likely to be flouting of norms, non-application of research ethics in various disciplines, and as we have found, most of these do have political repercussions and sometimes the scientific and social community repercussions as well. It is the job of the ethics committee to protect the rights and well-being of all the participants and to ensure that the research is carried out in compliance with the norms. The ethical committees are normally multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral committees, and they are adequately representative of not only the technical side of the research, but also of the community that they are researching or studying. As the member legal of several ethics committees, I have found that I have a dual role to play in ethics committees. I not only help to interpret and inform the ethical committee members of the laws and regulations in force, but I may also have to interpret any agreements, MOUs, insurance documents, researchers' undertakings or any guidelines that need to be complied with by the researcher and the ethics committees. In addition, I play the role of a lay person who is not directly or technically qualified and may require interpretation by the researcher, and I also serve as a representative of the participant community and represent their interests in the research. The Constitution of our country provides various provisions that are relevant to research and the conduct of ethical research in the country. The Constitution is a set of fundamental principles and rules according to which India is governed. The rights and duties of citizens and powers of governmental agencies and public bodies and the limitations thereof are enumerated in the Constitution. Some of the most relevant provisions are enshrined in Part 3, Fundamental Rights of the Constitution. Article 14 talks about the equality of citizens before the law and equal access to the law. Article 15 enables the government to make special provisions for backward classes of the society as well as women and children. Article 15(2) states that the state shall ensure that there is no disability, liability or restriction with regard to access to those public and state funds which may be available to the common citizens of the country. Now, this 15(2) is important because if research is being conducted with state funds, then there may be no disability cast to certain groups. It is a part of the non-exploitation clause which is also there in the Constitution. In the ethical framework, non-exploitation means that no person shall be a means to benefit another person without benefit to himself or herself. Article 19(c) talks about the right of participants to form associations if they so wish. So, patient associations or associations of those who have participated or are continuing to participate in trials are enshrined in Article 19(c). 19(g) and 19(6)(1) talk about the requirement of the researcher to be a practicing professional, and Article 19(6) in particular states that the government may make the requisite guidelines for qualifications and may ensure that the person who is professing to be a researcher or who shall be a researcher shall be qualified in particular ways. Article 21 is one of our widely interpreted constitutional provisions. It provides for protection of life and personal liberty, and we shall go talk a little more about it in the next couple of minutes. Article 23 talks about the prohibition of traffic in human beings. The Oviedo Convention also talks about traffic in human beings and human tissues and human organs. So, as the ethical framework widens to include such areas, Article 23 becomes more and more relevant. Article 21 has been recently expanded by the case of Justice Puttaswamy versus the Union of India, where the right to privacy was read into Article 21, along with human dignity, physical integrity, mental integrity and autonomy. All of these are relevant to all trials and research being conducted in the country. The right to privacy was stated to be of 9 parameters, of which informational privacy forms the backbone. So, today as all of us become data points and all of our data is in the hands of certain authorities or certain organizations, informational privacy becomes a relevant aspect when research is being conducted. When there is no informational privacy, it is difficult to have decisional privacy, and this is a very important aspect of the informed consent. If a person is not able to have privacy in making a decision and the intellectual capacity to make a decision, autonomy is compromised along with informed consent compliance. In a country like India, where there is a large amount of difference between people, where there are literacy levels may vary, levels of economic value may vary, it is important not just to be equal in the constitutional terms, but also to be equitable. And here is where there are other fundamental provisions of the Constitution that come into play. In particular, Part 4A that talks about fundamental duties. Article 51A(h) says, "It shall be the duty of every citizen of India to develop the scientific temper, humanism and the spirit of inquiry and reform." Without a scientific temper, scientific research is impossible. Dependence on empirical data, dependence on data led or analytical data led outcomes is an important factor in research. Besides that, Article 51A also talks about the duty to abjure violence and to strive towards excellence. These fundamental duties are often ignored or neglected when we discuss scientific issues, but to strive towards excellence is a fundamental requirement in good research. All the rights provided under Part 3 are guaranteed enforcement, but there is a set of principles that are provided in Part 4 which are not enforced or judicially enforceable by law. These are called the directive principles of state policy. Here there is a duty cast upon the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living and to improve public health to the extent possible by the state. The directive principles of state policy are important and are an important part of research ethics, because they ensure equity and ensure that research takes into consideration the humanity of the participant. Why do we need laws? In general, all systems of human society are guided by a certain set of rules which protect the general safety and comfort of the community. They ensure that rights are protected against abuses by other people, governments and other authorities, and they ensure regulation of professions, products and markets. Generally, regulation of professions, products and markets are also called standards. Equal application of laws and remedies are also provided under these very same guidelines or laws. But when we talk about laws in India, we are not restricted only to the acts or legislations. There are a number of other statutory requirements that are also required to be complied with. Rules that are framed by the government may include forms and fees and may come as a part of the act or may be subsequently written by the appropriate authority. Regulations are framed by statutory authority to reduce uncertainty and to close gaps in interpretation. Guidelines are administrative. Normally, they are not mandatory and only for internal guidance, but there are certain situations where they are mandated by the legislation, and in these cases may be read as part of the law. Standards provide requirements, specifications, guidelines or characteristics that are used to ensure that materials, products, processes and services are fit for their purpose. These standards may also be mandated as legislation or may be guidelines. Schedules generally include details that would detract from the overall sense of the provision. The schedule is as authoritative as the text of the Act itself. We know this from understanding Schedule Y of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. In most of the research or research studies or clinical trials that we look at, there are a common set of stakeholders which include the researcher, the research institution, the authority, the sponsor and a number of participants. The linchpin is the ethics committee. But the system works because there is a complex interrelationship of rights, duties and responsibilities that each of the stakeholders has to ensure. For instance, in order to ensure the voluntariness of the participant, the researcher must ensure that he complies with all the informed consent requirements. At the same time, he is also required to submit information on a regular or periodic basis to the ethics committee. Again, if you look at the requirement for privacy, the research design that the researcher is going to use must itself include certain provisions to ensure the privacy of the participant. At the same time, the privacy of the participant is also ensured by the continuous review and monitoring by the ethics committee. Again, the ethics committee has the right and the power to review documents or to visit sites, and it is also there is also a complex set of requirements that are expected from the participant. The role of the ethics committee does not stop with the conduct of the trial or with the end of the trial, or in cases of research studies with the end of the research study. The ethics committee is often required to go into post-study issues including publication or fallouts from publication, or into adverse events that may have taken place during the trial. In these cases, research includes more than just clinical trials. It includes the work of students at various levels including master or doctoral levels, and the reporting of the results may also be in different contexts. It may be in a conference or it could be in a peer reviewed journal. It could also be used to support a policy of the government. Constant vigilance is required by the ethics committee to promote the freedom of the research and also impartiality and verifiability. So, sometimes the ethics committee in their zeal to ensure compliance may appear to be restricting the freedom of research, but it must be viewed with a purposive way to see that the ethics committee is actually promoting good science and good research. Relationships between researchers and their various collaborators, the MOUs that are drawn up between institutions and their researchers or researchers inter se, may also be part of the reviewing work of the ethics committee. Respect for the individual, groups and institutions being studied is important. In particular, where vulnerable populations are involved, such as elderly or those in prisons or those in institutions. In such cases, the issues of consent and privacy become more important, and it becomes it is a greater responsibility. There is a greater responsibility on the ethics committee in such situations. Perhaps now it is important to look at how research ethics and legislations overlap. So, from the Nuremberg trials onwards, we are seeing that there is an understanding that scientists need to be controlled in their zeal for research. However, it is not only an ethical or moral stand that controls their zeal, it is also legislation. There is an overlap in several of the ethical considerations and the legal requirements or provisions to protect the rights of the participants. For some of these are here. For instance, subjecting participants to harm. Now, causing harm to participants may not involve torture experiments, but it could also involve social experiments or may subject participants to social stigma, in which case the legislation takes care of it. Again, treating participants as a means for the benefit of others. This may happen when the population being studied belongs to a particular class, whereas the class that is to be benefited may not be the one that is being studied. Privacy and confidentiality are protected by a number of legislations, as are research on children. In particular, the Juvenile Justice Act, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015 provides a number of different requirements that must be followed by researchers studying on children and the person who is taking care of them. But besides this, there are ethical considerations which legislation does not currently adequately protect. These are normally those that further equity and well-being. For instance, the professional ethics of researchers, a multidisciplinary perspective of the ethics committee, and such aspects as access to data under different requirements and the right to publication and critique. The last of these, right to publication, are covered under other legislation such as copyright. Quite often, in spite of the most stringent oversight by the ethics committee, certain outcomes may not be taken too kindly by either community or the political leaders. For instance, Penny Verasanso's paper on the work of elderly, work on the lives of elderly in urban India did lead to certain types of repercussions for her, which have currently prevented her from continuing her research in India. Responsibilities of different stakeholders are very specific under various guidelines, and these must be viewed equitably and purposively to expand to the largest possible context. In general, the ethics committee's responsibilities include to safeguard the rights, safety and well-being of all trial subjects. Particular care must be taken to protect vulnerable subjects. These include elderly, infirm, children, those with mental disabilities or institutionalized subjects. It is also their duty to maintain the SOP, standard operating procedure documents of the institution and of their own ethics committee. It is also required that they maintain a faithful record of their proceedings. Periodic studies of progress reports or monitoring audit reports and visiting sites is also a right and a power that they can exercise. In addition to these stringent requirements, the ethics committee must ensure freedom of the research. The most honest standards of documentation must be followed by the researcher, and the findings and analytical reasoning must be consistent throughout the document or throughout the study. It is possible that when there is a grant or when there is a sponsorship involved, freedom of research may be impaired, and in such circumstances ethics committees must ensure that the researcher is able to provide an honest outcome. Researchers, particularly in population studies or epidemiological studies, may have views on the society which may be reasonable and consistent input into the research. However, it is the duty of the ethics committee that these do not descend into bias. Authorities of various types may be involved in research. For instance, in clinical trials, the licensing authority is a stakeholder. However, in other types of research, other authorities may be involved, those governing institutions or those governing services, students, education and so on. Authorities grant permission for initiating studies and may propose an outcome. They need to be informed of the approval of trials and the trial protocols and the processes that are involved that are going to be part of the protocol. It is the duty of such authorities to ensure that research studies promote social welfare. They are obligated to allocate resources based on the best interests of the society. The directive principles of state policy are a good guidance document towards what needs to be done further in India to alleviate various disabilities, social or otherwise, that people may be suffering from. Innovative and critical research should be encouraged and promoted. In particular, analytical and impact outcomes must be analyzed. Innovative research does not only mean new or novel areas of research, but the use of new and novel technology, new and novel methods of data collection and analysis, and a critical research thereon may yield results which otherwise may not be accessible. It is also necessary that research must be done by persons who have access to the culture and language of the people or population that they are studying. This becomes relevant in order to ensure sustainable activities to actually bring about and operationalize impact. Sponsors of research studies often have a dual role to play. One, they do promote research, but again they may have a commercial outcome in mind. In most cases, in particular in clinical trials, the outcome is to ensure regulatory status, a positive regulatory status for their study drug in that country. In that case, the sponsor is interested to ensure that the report is of or contains sufficient data to ensure a positive regulatory outcome. The sponsor is also required to ensure that those persons or participants suffering from SAEs are covered adequately by insurance, and compensation is paid on time to ensure that the sponsor's rights and duties are fulfilled. More importantly, it is the duty of the sponsor to protect the research from commercial pressures. It is necessary that the researcher be aware of the commercial requirements, but at the same time may have independence of research. Again, the sponsor's input to the decision making process will have to be considered by the researcher, but may not guide the research completely. Researchers are probably the most important part of the study. The rights and duties of researchers are necessary to be protected by all other stakeholders, including the sponsors and the ethical committee. Researchers must be qualified, experienced and trained. In addition, in population studies, they must have adequate knowledge and experience of the language, tradition and culture of those populations. They must conduct the trial according to the protocol or the study design. In certain cases, the researcher may be required to provide an original design, in others that may not be required, and whatever the design, transparency is a requirement. Reporting of injury caused by the research to the appropriate authority, such as SAEs to the sponsor and the ethics committee, are a core responsibility of the researcher. Researcher also must ensure that he remains independent of pressure, even while reporting to the authorities and sponsor the outcomes of the research. Recruitment of participants is the primary responsibility of the researcher, but may be subject to oversight by the sponsor, authority and the ethics committee. In the event of injury or an adverse event during a trial, the duty to ensure that the participant receives care, whether in terms of psychological care or medical care, is a responsibility of the researcher. Overall, the researcher must view himself as a member of the community. Where he is studying a community or population to which he does not belong, it is the duty of the researcher to put himself or herself in the shoes of the community that he is studying, to ensure that there is no undue pain or trauma caused to the community that they are studying. Quite often when studying the rights and duties of stakeholders, the rights and duties, the rights of the participant are well covered, but the duties of the participant are forgotten. It is the right of the participant to be informed, but it is also the duty of the participant to seek information. It is important that a participant be empowered, enabled to seek the information that he or she requires before consenting to be a part of the study. In order to be able to participate fully in the study and to follow the protocol completely, the participant must seek to be educated and made aware not only of the benefits of the study, but also any risks in the study. It is important to understand this particular provision because in India literacy levels are varying from different states and different communities, and therefore an equal understanding is not possible. An equitable understanding is possible. where a participant appears not to be literate enough to understand the protocol, there must be extra efforts made to ensure that the participant receives the full knowledge of the study. Again, it is the duty of the participant to follow the protocol once explained to him, or to his own detriment suffer from the consequences. It is important that the participant be an informed and informed participant of the study, knowing that there are duties and obligations cast upon him and not only rights. It is the duty of the participant to report any adverse event or any injury caused to him by the study to the appropriate authorities, in particular to the researcher and the ethics committee. It is also important that the participant be informed of the consequences of withdrawing untimely from the trial or study without proper process. In many psychological, psychosocial or population studies, withdrawal may have social stigma or may lead to psychological trauma, whereas the research design may actually have enough safeguards to ensure against that. Assent in respect of minors is a critical area where participants need education. The Juvenile Justice Act of 2015 clearly states that those persons in control of a child or in care of a child, the fit person within the act, must ensure the best welfare of the minor. Assent in respect of a child's participation in the study must be only after considering the best welfare of the child. Quite often a participant, an adult participant or an assenting participant may not be aware of the requirements that the child must also be comfortable with the study. It is possible that the child consents due to pressure, but then later does not wish to continue, in which case the assent would be invalid. Another stakeholder who has quite an important role to play is the research institution. In many cases, particularly in student research and so on, or doctoral research, research institutions play a vital role. In particular, they have to make the arrangement for governance of the research. The policies and SOPs governing the type of research, the manner of the research, the duration of the research, the publication of the outcomes, and the MOUs with the other institutions where the student might be working are all the primary responsibility of the research institution. Data ownership may be decided between the research institution and the other institutions as well as the researcher in collaboration. The primary responsibility for the research or ethical research is the responsibility of the research institution. Misconduct, including plagiarism, infringement, or data mismanagement will reflect on the research institution, and therefore, the responsibility to ensure that compliant research is carried out in the institution is that of the institution. The research institution must also provide the infrastructure, funds, personnel and training opportunities to all the stakeholders who sit on committees such as the ethics committees, the scientific committees, animal ethics committees, as well as researchers who require training and personnel who will manage not only data, but also proceedings and review proceedings. The research institution must take a call on the volume of research that is permissible to be within the economic capacity of the institution, and must restrict themselves to that in order to ensure good quality research. In case of academic research and clinical trials, research institutions must ensure insurance coverage or maintain a corpus fund and ensure that compensation and medical care are provided in case of injury or adverse event. It is necessary for the research institution to also mitigate conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest may arise between the sponsor and the research institution and the researcher, various collaborating researchers inter se, and between the legal and other standards that are required. It is important that the research institution understand the possible conflicts and try to mitigate them, while ensuring fair opportunity to research to the researcher and to ensure that the researcher continues to enjoy scientific freedom. The final outcome of this complex relationship is that the relationship between ethics, scientific research and the constitution or the law is an evolving one. The relationship is mutually beneficial when these relationships evolve in a compliant manner, and law depends on research and researchers to provide appropriate data to operationalize certain of the equitable measures or provisions provided in law. I am providing 3 examples here. Article 16(4) and 16(4)(a), for instance, talk about reservation in posts and matters of promotion for backward classes, and the provision says, which in the opinion of the state is not adequately represented in the services under the state. Now, here the opinion of the state is not a political opinion of the state, nor is it a dictatorial opinion of the state, but an opinion based on scientific requirement, probably on the in line with the requirements of administration, or in line with the requirements to provide welfare measures to backward classes. Again, is not adequately represented is clearly an empirical requirement. Researchers will be able to fill these gaps to promote the equitable stance taken by the provision. Again, Article 335 talks about the claims of members of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, which shall be taken into consideration consistently with the maintenance of efficiency of administration. Now, maintenance of efficiency of administration is again a requirement that needs to be filled into Article 335 to operationalize the clause. Article 41 states that the state shall, within the limits of its economic capacity and development, make effective provision for securing the right to work, to education and to public assistance in case of unemployment, old age, disability and other cases of undeserved want. In provisions like these, issues such as economic capacity, development, effective provision and security have to be operationalized only with the help of researchers who are working in areas of population, economy or econometrics, macroeconomics, but in conditions such as unemployment, old age, disability and so on, also in medical areas, areas of biomedical ethics and so on. Therefore, when we study the complex relationship between law and ethics, it is not a stable, immutable relationship that we have to follow, nor is it a diktat by the law towards the bodies that are compliant with ethics, but it is a two-way track where the ethical relationship must engender and empower the legal relationship, and the legal relationship must ensure that it does not deteriorate into a power relationship. Thank you.